Now that you have your paper set up, you are going to get a palette that looks like this with some coffee. This is instant coffee, not grounds. And the first thing you'll need with your water is to drip some water into one of the wells of your palette. You could probably use a bigger brush for that to make it faster. Do not pour. I've seen people try to do that. That is a bad no-go. You'll end up with a big old mess. Once you get some water in a well, then you just dip your brush into the granules like this, and they stick to your brush, and then you stir it up and you make your own paint. You're gonna create 3 to 4 different values here, and I like to start with dark because that's the easiest one to do, and then work my way backwards. I'm just gonna keep adding and make this the darkest one. So the more granules you add to your palette, the darker it'll get. It looks pretty good. And stir it till it all dissolves. And then you just paint that one. You could probably go darker, we'll see, and you can always add to it. You can't take away. So to make the lighter one, I like to just do the opposites. Then I'm just gonna take whatever's left on my brush, kind of tap it into a new well, and just add some water. So you might wanna leave one of your brushes as the one that adds the water, and that can be your lightest one. And in the video, it's probably not gonna show up very well, but that's because it's the lightest value. So I think I'm gonna go a little darker. Actually, you can take some granules straight from your brush, and if it's wet over here still, you can go straight to there, and you can see how dark you can get it. The darker you can get it, the better, because we wanna play around with different areas of our painting to look darker. And then in between, so now I've got a light value, let's make a medium. So I'm gonna put this one over here, add some water, and some brown. So this one looks light, and make it just a little darker. That one's a little bit darker. So once you have your 4 values, then you can play around with the different techniques. It's nice to see what this paint can do. Honestly, this is a lot like watercolor paint. So if you've used watercolor paint, it's the same idea. There we go. So I've got my gradual fade from dark to light. So salt, you want to use the darker one for that because salt reacts with water and makes it lighter. So the darker you have your value, the more it'll show up. This has to happen right when it is wet. If you do this after it's dry, you won't see anything happen. Keep the salt nearby, and as soon as you finish, just sprinkle some salt on there and leave it. And that's something that will change throughout the whole period of class. Leave it alone, don't paint on top of it. If you paint on top of it, then it'll mess it up. I like to also use the dark value for the plastic wrap. It just shows up better. I got a little salt there. Might be fun to see how both of them work together. And then you'll get a piece of plastic wrap, and while it is wet, kind of have to work fast, and just crumble it up and set it on top. And it immediately starts to create these like cracks, almost like broken glass, but leave it there until it dries. Layers is when you probably need like a medium color, and you paint a section of medium and then let it dry, and then add another layer on top. So we're gonna leave that, let it dry. Drips, those are my favorite. You're probably gonna need your bigger brush so you can get more paint in there. I like to use the darker value for that one. So you're just gonna hold your finger out like this and tap your brush onto your finger. So that's more like a splatter, honestly, but you can hold up your paper, you can make it drip because it is coffee, and it would be fun to see what it would look like. Wet on wet, you're gonna use actually water first. You're gonna wash the paper with water, and then you're gonna take probably another darker value. It just shows up better, but on your actual painting, you can use whatever values you need. But while it's wet, you just kind of tap in the color and just kind of watch how it blends and bleeds, and it's kind of fun. You can just, and that's called wet on wet. You might even try to sprinkle some of these granules on the wet and see what happens. Today is all about experimentation, to see like what this stuff does and to see if you like something for your actual painting. The last and final thing you can do is go back and add some layers to this section over here. And you'll see that when you paint over top of the dry coffee, it will get a little darker, so you can accomplish the different values by layering. So there's just several different ways to accomplish the different values.